Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my very special guest is my friend and colleague, Jennifer Catlin. Jen is a certified master hypnotherapist and a longtime teacher and continued student of yoga and mindfulness meditation. Jen is a certified master hypnotherapist and a longtime teacher and continued student of yoga and mindfulness meditation. She holds a dual BA in psychology and elementary education and a master's in school psychology. Jen also completed the Duke University program for Integrative Medicine and Mindfulness, and she is a member of the International Association of Counselors and Therapists. Her practice is located in Cary, North Carolina. Along with Jen's professional credentials, she's also a terrific mom who decided to homeschool her children. And for this show, I asked Jen if she could step us through that decision by explaining how she got started, along with the benefits of homeschooling, and to dispel some of the misunderstandings of what homeschooling is and what it is not. And so without further ado, here's Jennifer Catlin. So Jen, with homeschooling, we hear a lot about it in the alternative news these days, but I'm not sure a lot of people really understand or know what homeschooling is about. What is it, and how does it differ from traditional school, kids going to public schools as an example? So can you help us understand a little bit more about what homeschooling is?
It's kids learning at home or in a home environment versus being in a traditional classroom with same-age peers.
Okay.
So homeschooling, there are so many different ways to homeschool and so many different approaches that I can talk to you about my approach, and there are some friends I have that use slightly different approaches. But really, we are matching learning to the child style. So it can, learning style. So it can be very individually based, and it's not just at home either. I mean, we're not just sitting at home and keeping the kids isolated. They're actually out there in the real world, just like they will be when they're out on their own as an adult. So we have them out doing a lot of hands-on activities. Our community in particular just has a multitude of classes, sports teams, theater, music, just all kinds of things for homeschoolers. So the kids are out engaging with all different, same age peers and kids that are older and younger than them, many different adults. There are groups that go to nursing homes, and so really the kids are learning more from the real world, in addition to using some, a lot of people do use some structured materials and curriculum as well, not everybody. It's hard to describe exactly what homeschooling is because there are so many different approaches, but what it's not is you're not sitting in a classroom being told specifically all of the time what to learn. We can use more of their interests to engage their learning, and we're able to tailor learning to meet their individual needs.
Okay, so traditional school, as we know, because I attended traditional school, it's very rigid.
Yes.
We have standardized testing and all that good stuff. So a homeschooler doesn't have all of that structure.
Usually not. I mean, again, there could be some families that try to make the school day look like it does in the classroom, but for the most part, I think most people are homeschooling because that didn't work well for their children. My kids were doing very well academically, but I found that love of learning just was completely diminished. And the testing, they were frequently testing, even when my daughter was in kindergarten. But the amount of testing from the time my son began third grade just grew exponentially. They were taking practice, they call them beginning of grade tests, to practice for the end of grade tests. And throughout the year, they were just having to really learn and focus for what was on the test versus learning how to learn. And then I have friends whose kids are in school, and when June came around, they felt like most of the month was just spent, again, on practicing for that end of grade test. And it's just a lot of, I felt, wasted time, and the kids were not enjoying. I mean, they just began to think that anything that had to do with learning was automatically not fun.
Okay, that's going to be one of the questions I'm going to get into later about how the children are adapting, going to homeschooling, coming from a traditional schooling background. So we have the testing, which really comes down to, like I mentioned before, standardized testing. It's a really almost conforming to whatever it is that they're teaching. I like to refer to it sometimes as rote memorization. It's just memorizing stuff and just kind of playing it back. And how well can you play it back determines, I guess, how good a student you are. What caught my attention when we first started this conversation is that you said that the learning from a homeschooling perspective is tailored to the child. So could you go into that a little bit more? What kind of tailoring? Do you identify a child's strong points, their desires, their motivations, their incentives, and then you play to those strong points of a child? Do you play to those attributes that the child is showing that they can excel at?
Yes, I think that's one of the benefits of homeschooling is that we don't have a large classroom where there are many different kinds of learners, and having to, in the traditional classroom, learning is often tailored to the kids who are sitting and doing a lot of seat work. And as much as they try to get the kids moving, it wasn't enough for my daughter. So for example, my son is more of a traditional learner. He learns really well with curriculum, and he somewhat, with some curriculum enjoys it, but he likes to also do a lot of hands-on activities and learn certain subjects that aren't taught in school. For example, he's in elementary school and he loves learning about solar energy. So we've been able to connect with college students in NC State and incorporate his interests into learning. My daughter, however, is a little bit younger than him, and she's very much a kinesthetic learner, and visual as well. So she learns much more from doing hands-on activities versus ditto work. She really can't stand ditto work, and it's torture for her. And to try to make her sit for the amount of time she had to sit in school as a young child was just awful. And while she was picking up on things academically, again, it was just her little spirit was being crushed. She was exhausted by the end of the day. It was too much to just sit all day for her. And she really does learn best through movement and from doing hands-on activities. And there just wasn't enough time for that to be occurring in the regular school day.
How about the homework? My understanding is that a lot of homework was also coming along with the traditional schooling. So the child would go to school for hours, 5 days a week, and then they would come home, and then there would be a ton of homework. So essentially, most of the child's day, Monday through Friday, and maybe even on the weekends, was preoccupied with school. And is that a fair assessment? Because that's the feedback I had been getting when I would talk to people that, I'm talking even to teenagers that are going to school, and they're saying this is how it works. It's just a constant churn of school and then homework.
In our experience, yes, and we hadn't even hit the upper grades yet because we decided to homeschool before that happened. I've heard that's even more the case, especially more so. I would say starting in second grade, the amount of homework that came through grew quite a bit. And for my kids, it was more busy work. It was work they already knew how to do, but they were just exhausted, mentally exhausted by the end of the day. And it was too much. Even in kindergarten, there was homework required. And again, it was busy work. So, and studies show that, especially in elementary school, that homework has no benefit in long-term academic success. Yet, we're not really, the schools haven't changed, many schools haven't changed their approach to the research that we have. But the homework issue for us was huge. Every night we came home and the kids just wanted to go play.
Yeah.
If we gave them the break to do that before doing homework, then it was even more difficult to come back. So we had a rule to just get the homework done, and then the rest of the night was their time. However, what they could have done probably in a short amount of time, because they knew how to do it, took forever because they were mentally exhausted. And it was just a battle every night. And I just got to thinking that, that battle wasn't worth it. They weren't gaining anything from that. As an adult, if we work a full-time job, we want to come home and veg because we're tired.
Right.
And there was just no time for them. They just didn't have that downtime or time to pursue in other interests, other creative interests that they had. There were lots of activities or just creative outlets that they wanted to explore. And because school did take up so much time just all day and then coming home and doing homework, there just wasn't time for them to explore the things that they were really interested in learning about.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound conspiratorial about this, but this sounds very interesting to me because it almost sounds like the way it's structured with traditional schooling is to keep the kids so preoccupied in rote types of activities and just keeping them heads down that what happens is a child has to experience creativity. They have to experience imagination. They have to explore. They have to discover. And it sounds like, at least with your experience with your children, is that they weren't getting that. That aspect of creativity and imagination was basically put on a shelf, and that's not right.
Right. I think that's a pretty accurate account of our experience. I mean, I will say we loved the teachers we had for the most part, and I felt like the faculty and the staff at the school we at were very caring. They loved our kids. I felt like they nurtured them. And I have teachers in my family. It's not usually not them. It's the system and the people making these educational decisions. Because I have teachers in my family who have seen changes, and I used to work in the schools as well, seen changes over time where that creativity is diminished and that time for that. And they're just so structured. The day is so structured with what they're allowed to teach and how they're allowed to teach it that it's become very robotic. And I'm not going to say there were no opportunities for creative outlets. I mean, they did do art projects and things like that, but overall, it felt very structured. And I can say now that we're homeschooling, just the difference and the amount of time for them to thrive and pursue their creative interests is very different than what they could do before.
Now, I know that you and I occasionally share some news articles on Common Core, which I personally believe is an incredible impediment to the learning process. I think it overly complicates the learning process for a child. I have done some digging into Common Core. I've taken a look at how they do some of their math, and quite honest, I would look stupid trying to do their calculations to essentially come to an answer that, based upon the math that you and I learned when we were growing up, we would get the answer like that versus having to go through this entire crazy process, what I consider to be distorted logic. So could you give me a little bit of your perspective on Common Core?
Well, so Common Core is a set of standards that was developed and adopted by vast majority of states. And the curriculum that's used, that was chosen to meet those standards has some serious flaws to it. I personally feel the biggest concern with it is that it is developmentally inappropriate for a lot of kids. Yes, my kids were doing okay academically. I personally saw many kids when that was adopted, since they just were really, really struggling, and typically in math. We were also told there would be very little time for kids to read fiction because so much of the standards had to be nonfiction based stories. So again, there's that creative outlet kind of going down the drain.
Right.
And even in high school, they've had to significantly reduce the amount of literature that's being read, and it's more the pumping of facts is the focus. I feel that when standards are developmentally inappropriate, we're actually creating, and there was research on this a long time ago with standards, we're actually creating learning disabilities in kids because their brains are just not ready to work in this way and to solve problems in a certain way. And it doesn't mean they're not going to be ready when they're older. I mean, pretty much everybody learns to walk. Just because you learn to walk sooner than somebody else doesn't mean you're going to be a better walker. And it's like that for reading and math. Some kids are just ready to pick it up sooner, and others are best to wait until they're just ready for it. They catch up. There's no behind. We have such a fear of being behind. And I admit, as a parent living in this society, there's times where I become afraid, are they behind or not? As a homeschooler in North Carolina, we have to test once a year. And so we just had our testing, and the kids are doing great. I mean, in terms of, what's expected and what is developmentally appropriate, they're doing fine. So I really think we need to be careful about not getting caught up in all of that fear of my kid's going to be behind in something. And there's such a push here. I mean, there are nations that are showing to perform much better on international standardized tests. Those nations give significantly more unstructured playtime for kids and recess. And the research clearly shows that unstructured playtime is needed in the brain. There are actual changes in the neurons in the brain, the prefrontal cortex.
Now, you had mentioned that you have to test once a year, and that was one of my questions. I was going to ask, how does the curriculum come together, and are there guidelines or criteria that needs to be followed? Does the state put any kind of structure in place or requirements in place that you have to adhere to?
That varies by state. Some states require you to submit work throughout the year and test however many times a year. Other states require nothing. You don't even have to notify. In the state of North Carolina, we have to notify our intent to homeschool. I believe you have to have at least a high school degree. I think it's a high school degree, not associates. And you're supposed to keep attendance records and vaccination records at home. And you are supposed to test the kids on a standardized test. You have a specific set of choices of which tests can be used. We did ours in person with the Woodcock-Johnson. So you can get testing done once per year, every 12 months. And in North Carolina, you don't have to turn those test scores in, but you keep them at home in case you were to ever, if anybody from the department that oversees homeschooling were to check in.
Okay. Now, what made you decide specifically to go the homeschool route? Like, I know you and I know each other, so I know that this is something that you went back and forth with, trying to figure out how you were going to do this. But for the sake of the audience, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are thinking about doing it, and I think the biggest fear is, I don't know if I can do it, how to do it. So could you explain that process and how you went about it? First, how did you decide? What was the moment in time when you said, you know what, traditional school is over, my kids are going to be homeschooled? And then from there, how did it come together? How did you structure your curriculum, and how did you go about that?
Okay. Well, there's been a shift over time, just trial and error and learning what works best for our family. But backing up, I do have a traditional background. I have my bachelor's in teaching, and I have my master's in school psychology. That is not necessary. I think that's one of the biggest myths out there is, did you teach your kids how to talk? We're teaching our kids all the time, but we forget that, and we think there has to be something special. So I researched this for several months because I felt like it was something we might want to explore. Specifically for us, it was more because I felt like the kids weren't having the time that I wanted them to have to be able to pursue some unique learning interests and explore those creative outlets. So in addition to that, just all the testing, I felt there was a lot of wasted time going on in school, and I saw that their love of learning was being diminished. And we were going to wait until the end of the school year for each of them to homeschool, and I was just going to spend time researching that year. I had already researched a bunch, but it was when we were in year-round school at the time, so they were in school for about 9 weeks and out for 3 all year. And we had a 3-week break at one point in November, and then they went back for 2 weeks before they were going to be off for the December holidays. And when I sent them back after the 3-week break, for those 2 weeks, there was just something in my gut, a very, very strong intuitive feeling. It just didn't feel good, and it didn't feel right. So I had that strong gut intuition that it was just time to pull them, that we did not have to wait until the end of the school year. They were asking, honestly, my kids have guided me along in this. I don't know that I would have specifically thought of this. I wasn't happy with them in school. Just our whole family felt like we were constantly on that hamster wheel of just racing to get things done. And evenings were once I dreaded when they came home from school because evenings were miserable. And the kids were asking to be homeschooled. So they're the ones who really got me thinking about that option. We also have a couple of homeschooling families in our neighborhood. So I was able to ask some questions and, thank goodness, like for the internet in this case, I was able to connect with homeschooling families across the country and ask a lot of questions because I didn't know anything in terms of homeschool curriculum or how to really approach this. But when I started researching, I saw that there were so many ways to do this where, a lot of people do use curriculum for certain subjects. There are also more people now who some aren't even using any curriculum, but they're doing a lot of real life experiences and activities and learning through their kids' interests. And I'm seeing, even with that approach, with not using any curriculum, that their kids are doing amazing things. I'm seeing the end results. Some of them have kids that have gone to college now. Their kids are doing great.
So, but what about people that will argue, well, okay, so if you're not going to follow a structure, if you're not going to follow a curriculum, then how do you teach subjects which may not be in your area of expertise? Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think that's a question, whether you are using curriculum or not, especially as kids get older.
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. Okay, so we do, in my family, we have chosen to use some curriculum. My son especially likes it, and I adjust my approach for my daughter. I feel like especially, I know some families who don't use curriculum, for things like math, they're doing it all the time in life, in cooking and out at the grocery store, and they play a lot of math games. They utilize a lot of things online. It's not that their kids aren't learning. They're just learning through different materials. Khan Academy, I know a lot of people that use activities on there. We have chosen to use a math curriculum. I feel like it helps me organize. It's just something that is just kind of a personal decision for me. And it teaches the kids, various strategies, and my son has learned those now, so he is able to choose which strategies he feels he can get it done quickly, and he understands it. So that's been a good thing. But, well, first with the homeschool, for those that do choose curriculum, there are so many choices. So it's helpful to get on some forums. We have an actual homeschool store where we live, so we were able to go there, and I was able to talk to people there and talk to them about my kids, and they were able to also make recommendations based on learning style. So there's a wide variety of choices out there. As far as teaching kids, and especially as they get beyond the elementary years, there are so many resources out there now. A lot of homeschoolers, the curriculum is laid out. So basically, it teaches the kids as they go along in the curriculum. So a lot of kids learn how to become self-learners, which is exactly what they'll have to do in college
Right.
or with anything, really. So I think it's teaching a very valuable skill that they get. With my daughter, I'm still pretty much doing things with her, but that's more because she's younger and her attention span is different. But my son is much more of an independent learner, and that's where his strength is, and he enjoys that. As they get older in middle and high school, we live in an area where there are a lot of classes, but you can even take things online. Once the kids reach high school in the state of North Carolina, they can take community college classes for free and only pay for the books, and they get high school and college credit for it, dual credit. So there are just a lot of options. I also know in our homeschool groups, the parents tend to come together, and we have many different parents who have different skill sets and different professions that they had of their own. So those parents also oftentimes will volunteer to teach specific classes. The universities around here have many classes for homeschoolers, and then there's all of the curriculum in general.
Well, that's very interesting. So there's a community. It sounds like what you're telling me is there's a community of homeschoolers, and That community not only consists of obviously people, but there are resources available to help you to pull together your homeschooling plan, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. And, I can't say that that's the case for every area, but because homeschooling has become so common across the country, and now it's actually becoming more common in Europe as well, certain countries in Europe, it's more common for there to be a lot more resources and communities of people coming together. We're not homeschooling, at least I'm not, and the vast majority of people I've met, all of them actually, at least in this area, are not homeschooling our children to keep them sheltered from real world problems or life. We know that they need to be prepared for that. Our kids are out engaging with other kids, same age peers and kids and adults of all ages on a daily basis. Our challenge, I've found, is actually not overscheduling. On any given day, there are so many activities and classes that we could take that I have to really be mindful of not overscheduling us just because something looks fun or neat.
Yeah.
So there really is a very, very strong community in this area, in many areas of the country now. And I think this is a good time to bring up too that in the past, I think it was common for people, and I was one of those people included, to think of homeschoolers as weird or unsocialized or only doing it for religious reasons. And that is just not the case. I mean, this experience has opened my eyes. Had you told me that I would have homeschooled years ago when I was a school psychologist, I would have thought you were crazy. But it really has opened my eyes. The opportunities that are out there are incredible, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. There are also a lot of free events. The museums around here are always offering different free classes or events, and it's been really interesting. And I will say as well, in our area, there are some very large secular homeschooling groups for people that aren't homeschooling specifically for religious reasons. So a lot of those myths, I think, that exist or that, or at least have existed aren't necessarily true.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Jen, because that is something that you do hear, that homeschoolers are weird, that the parents are overprotective. They want to keep their children from interacting with society as if school is the society. And if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is this is not the case at all. And I'm also very impressed with the resources that North Carolina has available to the homeschooling community.
I think there are always going to be those groups of people who are trying to shelter their kids, and that may be the reason they're doing this, but that's an extremist point of view, an extremist reason. I don't think that is the general population we're talking about.
Yeah, the exception to the rule.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. And as far as the resources in our area, especially the Triangle area, but even other counties have some amazing things going on. We do. I think we have a lot here too because of the university system is so big, and it draws on a lot of professionals, from different professions. And there's a lot here, but there are just a lot of parents who are wanting something different for their children and wanting their children to be able to pursue those creative outlets. We even put together, one of the parents in our homeschool group has put together a robotics group, and my son's doing that. But there are enormous opportunities out there, and it's not just our area. I know there are many, many other places within North Carolina and within the country, because so many people are unhappy with the way the educational system, with the way their children have been feeling and how they're doing in the educational system. There's a lot of kids too who have been falling behind and falling through the cracks, and they don't have learning disabilities, but they're being created because the kids just can't keep up. And then the kids, sense of self-confidence is
it becomes deflated.
Yes. I mean, talk about spirit crushing. It's really sad to hear some of the comments that I heard from parents. I have several friends, and I know you and I sort of work around the world of mental health as well, but I have several friends who run psychotherapy practices for kids and teens, and over the years, especially recently, the amount of school-related anxiety that of kids that they're seeing with school-related anxiety has gone up quite a bit.
Yeah, well, they're handing out anti-anxiety medications to children.
Yes.
It's bizarre. You would think that somebody with a half a brain in their head would step back and say there's something very, very wrong with what's going on. But it doesn't seem like that anybody that's in the system, I'm talking about the educational system, at least the people that make decisions, are in tune to that or care about that. And what's happening is the parents themselves are taking the bull by the horns, and they're doing what comes intuitively to a mother and a father with regard to their children. I mean, they know what's best for their children. And I'm very happy to hear, because I was unaware that the homeschooling, and again, folks, we're talking about North Carolina, where Jen and I live, is this progressive with it. I am very, very happy to hear this.
Very much so. And I think it really is a parent-led movement. I think parents are wanting this for our kids. We're wanting our kids to socialize and be out in the real world, and we're not doing it to isolate them or shelter them. And so the parents are the ones creating these groups and coming together. And whenever our kids, it's just wonderful, whenever our kids show a specific interest in something, whether it's robotics, or now they're taking theater classes too, or chess or engineering, like no matter what it is, we can always write within our group and say, hey, does anybody else have a child who's interested in this kind of activity or topic? And there you go, a new club is born. So it's been a really wonderful thing, and the parents are very supportive. We have a lot of unstructured playtime as well. As I talked about, some of the research, all of the research that's out there is showing just how important that is for children to get that. It actually develops the part of the brain that helps kids develop planning skills, socialization, memory, all kinds of things, emotional regulation. So it's important for them to get that. And they were not getting very much of that at all. You know, when people are so concerned about socialization, I think it's kind of funny because school's not providing that opportunity. I mean, when are the kids really socializing? They get recess at most for half an hour a day in elementary school, none in middle school, and they're not getting that time for just positive, unstructured socialization. When we are doing any kind of work, you know, whether we're working on math or anything else, the other thing is it goes so much faster one-on-one. We tend to do science and history, those kinds of things together, and I can modify based on their ages and abilities, but everything goes so much faster. So we can get whatever it is we want to accomplish done within the amount of time it used to take to do their homework, because getting them to do the homework was such a battle. Get it done when they're fresh in the morning, and then they have the rest of the time, you know, we go to museums, we go to parks, on hikes. They're in different kinds of classes. We're in a 4-H group. I mentioned robotics and theater. They take piano lessons. So it just really opens up a whole world for them to explore different things and get to know who they are as people. And also, we've had discussions, you know, that spark some real critical thinking skills.
Well, and I know you know this, you know, the system, and we're talking about the system, talking about the education system, it really attempts to have students conform. They want conformity. They want standardized, robotic types of thinking, approaches to life. That's how they want it. And it's going back to what we said earlier in the conversation. The whole piece that's missing is the creativity. It's the imagination and the exploration that a child is just, that's what they do. That's,
right.
You know, that's what they do. And it sounds like the homeschooling is bringing the child into an environment in which the child feels very comfortable operating in and being in and experiencing. So, and I can easily see how this would enhance learning.
Absolutely. And we just don't have all of that wasted time either. I mean, there's so much. I have a lot of teacher friends who homeschool their kids, and they talk about how there really is a lot of wasted time just on a day-to-day basis, even between transitions and distractions. And we're not having to deal with that. So we do have a lot more time for them to explore. And I think about as a nation, I'm sure they would love to create good workers, little robot workers.
Right.
But as a nation, if we're going to advance, creativity is so important because that's where innovation is going to come from.
Right.
And yeah, our kids aren't doing that. I changed a lot in my approach. I will say when I first started homeschooling, as much as I was told not to make our day look like a school day, I kind of started a little bit with that approach. And because that's just what I knew. And I very quickly realized that wasn't going to work. So it has been a lot of trial and error over the past year. I feel like we finally kind of found our way now, but I've changed my approach a lot where it is more about teaching them how to learn. Not always. I mean, of course, the basics are important, but not always just what to learn.
Right.
And so we can utilize their interests. If, my daughter's really interested in learning about dogs and horses, and so she gets a lot of her reading in about that, writing stories about it. There's a lot that can be incorporated with that. But yeah, that creative piece is missing, and it's sad, with the budgets and just the priorities of schools pushing so much of these standards now, that a lot of the creative outlets and programs that schools had are no longer there. I know in North Carolina, when we moved here and my kids started school, I asked the music teacher, when can they start learning an instrument? And it wasn't until middle school.
Yeah.
Where when I went to school, we got to start in elementary school, but they just don't have band anymore. There's no budget for it.
Yeah, that's the thing, the budget aspect of it. I was talking to Rebecca's son the other day. He's in high school, and he was saying that they have no funding, so they have a shortage of paper.
Yes.
They have a shortage of
paper. Yes, parents used to bring paper to the teachers.
It's unbelievable. So what happens is that lack of resource, that spills over. The kids pick up on that. Right? The kids know that they don't have paper. They know that they don't have they have a shortage of textbooks or whatever it may be that the school is supposed to have, but it doesn't have. And so that's another thing, it's basically putting another boat anchor, if you will, onto the child. And if they think that a kid is not picking up on this stuff, they're absolutely wrong. They're picking up on this. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, they're going to go to these traditional schools. They're going to get bogged down in standardization and want to make sure everybody's consistent, and it's very rote. And then on top of that, oh, by the way, we don't have really the tools and the resources. So ask your mother to bring paper to the classroom. It's, absurd. It really is absurd. And the thing that you mentioned before, and it really resonated with me, is that it's the creativity and the ingenuity that is going to raise the bar in this country and for humanity, right? We don't want just workers. We want creative, imaginative human beings.
Right.
And this is how we're going to make this place a better place, by having a population of humans that are free thinkers and they're critical thinkers and they're problem solvers, and they have empathy and compassion. That's what we need. We don't need rote workers. I mean, of course, there are going to be people that are going to fall into maybe that type of life or whatever it may be, but there's no reason to try to make everybody that. And the schools, in my view, are trying to pigeonhole most kids into that corner, and it's completely wrong.
Yeah, well, the educational system as a whole is doing that. There is, it was Gardner who has a multiple intelligence theory, and in all these different intelligences, and yet the educational system tends to teach toward one or two of them. And so kids with these other kinds of intelligences and other kinds of learning styles are just not doing well. I mean, I don't even know, had we continued, my daughter was doing very well academically, but over time, I don't know if that would have continued, just because she needs to move. And a lot of young kids do.
Yeah.
But, she either would have ended up really, really hating school or suffering academically just because she will tune out if she's not getting that movement that she needs.
Yeah, and it is about memorization, right, for the most part. And I
Yeah.
was thinking about this before we connected today. I was thinking back to when I was in school. I'm going back to my high school days and maybe even college. And I did well in high school. I did well in college. I was good at memorizing and then, taking the test and
Right.
playing back what it is that I memorized. But, when I think back at what I went to school for and the courses I took, very little of it, very, very little of it is applicable in my life today. In
Correct.
fact, I'm going to say most of it is not applicable from the day I left high school or the day I graduated from college. And to me, that's very telling because I went to school, I learned all these things, I memorized all these things, I took tests, I passed, and I was told I was good at these things, and then I never used them.
Yes, that's a big concern. And that's why people who take more of the approach, which, we definitely have our fair share of just running with the kids' interests and learning through them. People who do that entirely, their kids are doing really great because they followed their interests, they found their passions and things that they love, and they just go full on and into exploring those things along with other things. I mean, they're still taking them to a lot of field trips on different topics and subjects, so their kids are getting exposure to other areas of life. But they're able to really dive into their interests at a younger age. And when kids are interested, they're more engaged. And when they're more engaged in learning, they're retaining the information. And that's what's going to be useful in their life. If kids tend to have strengths in a certain area, why not let them run, with those and just go full on into those learning interests that they have, because that's only going to serve them and society. There's a couple of really good documentaries I wanted to mention. One is called Race to Nowhere, and it's on Netflix, and it talks about this whole issue. In colleges now are starting to see a generation of kids who don't know how to learn. They only know how to memorize,
Right.
More so than from when you and I went to school, much more so. And it's because of all of this increased testing, and the kids are wanting so much structure around what to do and how to do it because that's all they've learned, rather than that free thinking and problem solving. And it's becoming very concerning to colleges who are looking to recruit kids and what they're seeing. There's another documentary called Class Dismissed, and that one is all about homeschooling. And people do it in a variety of ways. There are a lot of parents who work and also homeschool. I work part-time. It is doable. I had to figure out what the right balance was for our family. There are some people who work even more than part-time and also homeschool. Homeschooling doesn't have to be done at specific hours of the day. The nice thing about it is it's flexible and you can work it around what works best for your family.
Well, that's one of the questions I had for you, Jennifer, was I'm assuming that the homeschooling means that you must dedicate more of yourself to the education, obviously, because now you're involved
Sure.
in the teaching process, whereas before the child got on a school bus and went to school. So how much more work is it, and how hard is it? Because I'm assuming some folks are probably listening and thinking, I would love to do it, but I mean, do I have the time to do this? Is it overwhelming? So could you give us a perspective on that?
Sure. Well, if it's a family that chooses to use curriculum, and again, we use some, I've really cut back. We're not using it so much with certain subjects anymore. It's mainly math, and the rest of it, we incorporate a lot of their interests in learning and do a lot of different science classes and history. So for people that want to use curriculum, it's really not a lot of work because everything is laid out for you right there. There's not a lot of planning. I do, recommend if possible to go along with whatever the kids are learning to get out there and explore some museums or field trips around what they're learning. I think kids in general of all ages tend to absorb. It means more to them if they're able to engage with that information in some kind of real life way. But For me, I tend to have a strong planner type A personality. And I thought I was going to have this all planned out. And for a little while I did, but I realized I don't need to do that because what we are using is written out very clearly for us. And everything else is really the kids. I mean, the kids have a natural, innate desire to learn and to explore the world around them. But we tend to try to fit them into this nice, neat little box rather than just exposing them to the world. I mean, I think in the elementary years especially, it's just important to expose them to a variety of things rather than trying to shove information down their throats. Do a lot of hands-on science projects that are fun for them. They understand more and retain it better.
What about something like biology? Let's just say, how do I phrase this question? Suppose your child has no inclination to learn about biology. I mean, my own perspective, I couldn't stand biology,
Right, right.
but I had to take biology class, and I got by. But if I had my druthers, I would not have been sitting in that classroom. Would have been
Right.
doing something else, maybe playing guitar. But so what happens in homeschooling? I mean, do you actually steer the child into biology anyway to get a rudimentary understanding, or is the take, what, that's not my child's desire or wishes or inclination, so biology's off the table? How does that work?
Right. I think that's one of those things that's a very personal and individual decision per family. It's interesting because my kids are interested in very different things, and because we tend to do a lot of those things together, they're exposed to it all anyway. Um, for something like that, I mean, I think it is a personal decision and should be because parents do know their kids best. I mean, if you think about it, in school, there's always going to be, in traditional school, always going to be gaps in learning. No school is always going to be able to teach everything there is to know, every subject there is to know on this planet. I mean, how many people don't know how to play guitar, like you do? And are they going to use that in their life? I think my decision personally, or what I feel is important, is to expose my kids to a wide variety of topics. And parts of biology may be that. And if they decide someday they want to go to college, they're likely going to have to take some sciences. But I don't think they necessarily have to know a specific topic so in depth
Yeah.
that, like they're an expert. I mean, my son hates art. He just can't stand it. And we were trying to do these art DVDs and go to art classes, and he doesn't like it. And I think that's okay. He doesn't have to.
Yeah.
There are a lot of subjects that I tuned out in school because I didn't like them, and I never used them. And yet I'm a successful, productive citizen, of society. And for example, too, like my son, they're not teaching solar energy in fourth grade right now, but he loves that. He loves learning all about green energy. So we're letting him fly with that. And that may be something he chooses to use in his life someday.
Good
Where,
for him.
if I focused on some other topic and made him learn all about it, but he's not going to use that, well, how's that helping anybody?
Yeah, and what's interesting, like I mentioned that biology was not my forte, right? But
Sure.
as I got older and I had to learn about things that included biology,
Right.
I had to research and I had to study and I had to get myself up to speed. And I can honestly say that what I learned back in high school, as an example, had no bearing on
Yeah.
what I had to look into and what I had to research later on in life. So your point is well taken in that you're going to excel in those things that require you to put your attention to.
Yes. That's exactly right. And, I think that's why it's most important to teach kids how to learn, how to seek out the resources to learn, how to critically think and problem solve. We developed a group. We're going to meet monthly where we're just giving the kids problem solving activities as a group. And in small groups, they have to solve these problems together. And it is just all about that creative problem solving. I think if you know how to learn, then you can always learn what it is you need to learn.
Right.
So you're able to apply those skills to learn whatever topic or subjects it is that you need to learn. I know people that went to college for certain professions that they had no prior background of, not even the basics.
Yeah.
And they are doing phenomenally well or have done phenomenally well in their careers, but they knew how to apply themselves. And that's, I think, more important than just shoving facts down someone's throat that they're not going to retain anyway.
Now, do you receive any kind of tax credit for doing homeschooling or?
No. Zero
Yes.
financial benefit. We still pay, our own taxes. We do not get a tax benefit. The only benefit I will say that we get, which is a pretty big benefit, is we do get teacher discounts. So at any stores, like the craft stores or bookstores, field trips, like we were able to go to the Ripley's Aquarium, and we got a significant discount on that. There's always group discounts we get because we're considered a class when we go with homeschooling groups.
Okay.
So, we get a lot of discounts on classes, field trips, and other things that otherwise we wouldn't get discounts to.
Okay. I have two more questions for you because I know that, I'm taking up your time here.
That's okay.
But now you mentioned earlier about vaccines, and I saved this question for toward the end of our discussion.
Right.
So what are the requirements for vaccines? I know in traditional schools, you have to have your vaccines, otherwise they won't let you in. And the exemptions are becoming fewer and far between, or more difficult to obtain. So
Right.
how does that work for homeschoolers?
Well, we're supposed to keep vaccination records, so basically just a copy of what vaccines or not the kids have had. And again, that's a matter of if someone's going to come and check and see. But as far as I know, the North Carolina the law is right now, is that even kids in public school, I think, can still get a religious exemption.
Yeah.
And quite possibly a medical exemption if it were like a severe allergy to something. But otherwise, there are no other exemptions. And so I am under this assumption that the same law applies to homeschoolers at this time. I know that there seems to be a big push across the country in many states, especially since California
Right.
changed their law for all students at least going to school. I guess that wouldn't apply to homeschoolers as of yet, but otherwise for all students to receive all vaccinations with no exemptions.
Yeah, well, we're going to have to do something about that.
Right. It really is taking away the rights of doctors, even if a patient's immune system is suppressed, because the only exemptions, at least from the research I've done, is more around, anaphylactic reaction kind of things rather than immunosuppression.
Yeah. Yeah, well, anytime you have anybody telling you that you're forced to do something, you really have to take a step back and you have to inspect and evaluate and assess what's going on, because nobody should be forcing anything upon anybody else, and that
Right.
includes the state. I mean, and that's, folks, that's Mike's perspective. I'm not speaking on behalf of.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I do think it really needs to be, we should be given choice, an individual decision.
Right, right. Now, the last question I have for you is, if somebody wants to start homeschooling, if you had to give them maybe the top 4 or 5 steps to get going, what would those steps be?
To get going, well, for one, trust your gut. If that's what your gut is telling you, trust that. I think that's important. I think we're so disconnected from our own intuitive selves, and that should be first and foremost. If that gut feeling is there, again, I tend to be a planner. Some people are better to just kind of go with the flow. So from my perspective, what helped me was research a little bit, if that will help your comfort. Get on some forums. A lot of people have Facebook or other accounts. Find some forums where you can talk to other homeschoolers and just ask about the various approaches. Start reading some articles about the various approaches to homeschooling, and If you're a person who wants to use some curriculum to kind of help guide the learning process, talk to people about that. Find out if there is a local homeschooling store. And if not, there is a lot of information online, and just kind of explore some of that. But otherwise, just trust the kids are going to learn. I mean, kids are learning in their environment all the time, and I think we don't give them enough credit for what they're learning. So if you pull them out, my suggestion once you start homeschooling, which I didn't necessarily take this suggestion, even though it was given to me by many people, and I wish I had, take some time off to decompress, because there's probably a reason you've decided to homeschool versus continuing with traditional school. Take some time to just have fun learning with the kids. Go to museums, play educational games, read books that they're interested in, but don't call it school. I still can't bring up that word school or learning to my kids. We just call it activities, because even now, over a year later, if I still mention that word school, even if it's something they would have loved to do, they all of a sudden hate it and want nothing to do with it. Like they've just been conditioned to believe that school equals torture.
That's so unfortunate, and the thing is, with a lot of parents, because, we came up through the traditional school system, so we have become conditioned and indoctrinated to believe that there has to be this rigidity.
Yeah.
If we don't have this discipline and we don't have this structure, and if it's not rigid, then it's not learning. That you can't learn, that it's not an education process, And so I think your words are very, very important where, hey, look, you know what? Take a step back, pause, and go with the flow. Be intuitive about what it is that your child needs. And go with that flow. This rigidity, this indoctrination, this structure is a system that's been put in place that we have just been entrained to believe is how it works. But if we take a step back and we critical think and free think ourselves as adults on behalf of helping our children, I think we will conclude very quickly that, you know what, I don't need that. We can do this in a very creative and imaginative way. And like you said, we don't have to use the word school, right? And just allow the kids to learn organically and intuitively.
Yeah, and I think it's what helped me and continues to help me the most is talking to homeschoolers who have older kids than mine. I'm able to see the end product of homeschoolers who've used curriculum and homeschoolers who call themselves unschoolers who do child-led learning. Unschooling doesn't mean they're sitting around watching TV all day. I know many unschoolers who are doing more, just amazing activities out there, and but they're helping their kids to learn based on their kids' interests. And I'm able to see those kids go on to college, and they are getting all 4.0s and then, if you say, well, academically they can do it. What about socially? These kids are the happiest, most well-adjusted kids, honestly, that I have ever met.
Yeah.
I just am in awe sometimes when I'm watching and just seeing how happy and well-rounded they are, because they've just been exposed to life, and instead of, stuck in a concrete building. But in the research too, the best research we have shows that social adjustment is not a concern. Of course, those ones that are the exception to the rule, who are sheltering their kids, of course that might be an issue and a challenge for them. But the vast majority, again, of homeschoolers are not homeschooling for that purpose. We're homeschooling because we want our kids to be out and socializing with other people of all ages and interacting in real life situations.
My daughter, she doesn't have any children yet, but she said to me, Dad, when I do have a child, would you homeschool them?
There you go.
I would love to do it. And, I have this little guy, this little gal sitting next to me doing a radio show.
Right.
Get to all this crazy stuff,
Yeah.
But, you know what, Jen, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. And I really am glad that we did this show, because I think it's important to dispel a lot of the misnomers and, quite honestly, some of the defaming that has been going on in the mainstream media with regard to the homeschooling. I'm going to call it a movement because it is a movement. It's picking up steam, and more people, as you've attested to, are now in it, doing it, and the results are fantastic. So I think this is very important to get this message out to the masses.
It is. I admit I was one of those people that used to be against homeschooling, and I thought it produced weird people, and that I was working in the school system as a school psychologist, and I never thought that I would be doing it, but it has been the best choice for our family. Even if the kids are sick, think about all that time they miss in school if they're sick, or snow days. We're able to, if they're sick, I'll still read to them. We can watch documentaries and learn about things that they're interested in. I don't feel like we're missing anything, and again, there is no really behind, because we're focused on where the kid is at and meeting them where they're at. So there isn't this race to keep up. I mean, the kids are going to learn how to learn, and they'll be able to apply those skills later in life, and they'll be fine.
I'm now actually looking forward to teaching my little grandchild.
Yes. It is fun. It is fun. And I wanted to mention one other thing, because parents always ask, well, how can you be with the kids all day? Or I fight with my kids so much to do homework that I couldn't homeschool. I couldn't possibly do it. But honestly, I had those same concerns. My kids are so much happier now. I mean, of course we have days. I have days where I want to chase that school bus down. But that's normal. I mean, I think we all have days like that as a parent. In general, we're having so much fun together, and they're happier. They're a lot less stressed. And because of that, we're able to, focus on more things. I think more learning is happening for them. And the time it took to fight with them to do homework and do that battle, it's all done, within that time. And they're much more cooperative. And yes, you're going to have days that you just need to lock yourself in the bedroom and scream. But we're going to have those anyway. So, it's just great. It's flexible. We get to travel more. And I really, now that I'm doing it, I can see it is doable. And I work part-time, I run my own business part-time. It's doable.
Right. And, and what you're doing is, and what the homeschooling community is doing, is they're fostering that family nucleus. They're putting it back together, which the state has spent enormous amounts of time, money, and energy trying to tear apart. And so, the natural, intuitive inclination of human beings is to be communities, to be family-oriented. And so by, bringing, your children in and homeschooling them, again, you are putting the family nucleus back together. And this is why it works, because that's the way we're supposed to exist.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to exist apart from each other, and have your children essentially be wards of the state. So I think this is just fantastic.
It is. And I feel like once we started homeschooling and joined some groups, I felt like I finally found community, which I realized I was seeking as an adult. And it is a community. The kids just get each other. And yes, they have squabbles sometimes because they've gotten to know each other so well. It's almost like they're siblings, but they learn to work it out, just like they would anywhere. And that's an important skill. And the kids really, in general, just enjoy each other's company. And it feels almost like a family unto itself, just the community, and being able to meet other homeschooling families and develop all kinds of groups and go to parks. And it has been a really great change for our family.
Yeah, great. Absolutely great. Well, Jen, I want to thank you again for coming on the show and talking about this. And you know that you can come back anytime.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, talk about this, talk about anything. Maybe we could talk about past lives and between lives in the next show. We have to do that again. It's been a while, so.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Jen.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
And that concludes another Sage of Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are included in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can get to the blog by typing in sageofquayradio.blogspot.com, or simply head over to our hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
I just wanna be left alone. I don't need